Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaming, feedism, and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim. So let's get into it. Today we're welcoming to the show for the first time. Today we've got Michael.
Ooh, Michael. Hey, baby, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. All the better for seeing you. All the better for seeing you, my love. What time is it where you are?
It is 1:18 in the afternoon here in Los Angeles.
Oh,
that's right. You're on the East Coast.
no.
I mean, West Coast. Sorry. Again, bizarre day at work. I can't keep my thoughts straight.
West Coast, Best Coast.
What was it we were talking about the other day, Tim? We had a couple of Southerners on the podcast, and they were all like, well, I'm from the Georgia South, and well, I'm from the Texas, and then I'm like, well, I'm from the actual South, the South of the fucking hemisphere, so shut up.
That's great.
Oh, gosh. Well, listen, Michael, we're so pleased to have you here with us today, because Tim and I were having a little bit of a chat. There is this thing wherein I feel like so many of us as gainers, feedists, we live these, not to say subversive lives, we lead lives that are maybe more on the quiet side, the sort of typical civilian, working different jobs, different careers, things of most nature that most people in the world do. You, on the other hand, my love, you're a musician, you're a singer, and a very talented one at that. And as a result, your work leads you to being visible to the public to an extent. And I feel like that's such an interesting subject matter that we haven't really had much opportunity to speak on or really get into in the podcast. And so we thought, what a great opportunity to bring you on and just talk about how that works for you. So really kicking things off here on that front, the listeners who may not be familiar with your work, what can you tell people about what you do and where they might know you from?
Sure. So, like you said, I am a singer. I technically studied opera and classical voice in school, and that was my bread and butter for quite a while. Since graduating, I've done a lot of stuff with musical theater. I've done really a lot of stuff with choir. That's how I kind of got my first foray into singing. You know, I joined this boys choir back in my hometown in Tennessee, and just really fell in love with singing from that point. But I will do pretty much anything vocal related. Just a couple of my highlights that I've done. I've done 2 presidential inaugurations. I got to solo at Carnegie Hall. I've done multiple international choir tours. I've been to South Africa, to Ireland, and to the UK just real briefly. But we recorded a lot of our choir songs on different albums. I've directed a couple of musicals. I've played piano in the pit for musicals and directed, and currently I am based in, like I said, here in Los Angeles and just taking gigs as I can get them.
Gorgeous. I love that you mentioned that opera was your bread and butter, and clearly that was before you became a fat fuck, because judging by the size of you, bread and butter is now your bread and butter. Would you say that's about correct?
Yes, you can say that. Nothing beats bread and butter.
No, it's just delicious. And listen, it's just for some clarity, I've known Michael for a minute, and you know, she's always been a little on the larger side. And I say a little because I think you were in the early to mid 200s from memory back when we started talking. What are you at now?
I am between like 435 and 440, depending on the day now.
So, you know, when I say she's made bread and butter her bread and butter, I tell you not a lie, kids. She's put a few treats in her mouth since then, and looking gorgeous as a result. And when we give you the socials at the end, you can go, and see for yourselves. But honestly, babe, that's such a fantastic recap of your journey that you've been on so far with your skills, with your talent. And I feel like we all know people who've done that thing of, oh, I'd love to go and study this, I'd love to go and be an artist professionally. And I think you are really repping that example of someone who's paid their dues, done the research, done the time, done the degree, got the qualification, and then gone out and just hustled and really done the thing, which is fantastic. And I think that's a real inspiration to anyone who wants to like pursue their art. That, like you say, you started in opera and you've really done this amuse-bouche of different vocal art styles to sustain yourself. So that's really, really cool. In that though, in terms of that portion of the journey in which you've been traveling and you've done things like you mentioned Carnegie Hall and inaugurations, were you on the larger side at those points in your career, or is that maybe not so much?
Yeah, so my career as like a gaining singer, whatever you want to call me, it was really tough, especially at the beginning. You know, um, just from the as far back as I can remember, you know, I always had an interest and a fascination with gaining, and I was, like you said, always a little on the chubbier side of things. I always tell people that I guess I officially started gaining at around 180 when I was really just kind of a kid. Before I even knew, I don't even think I like found anything on the internet yet. Um, but yeah, as you know, I got a little chunkier when I was in grade school and high school, and then you know, by the time I got to college, I was maybe about 240, 250 when I started. And you know, I have my doubts, just like I feel like all gainers do. You know, you gain a little bit, you like it, then you get self-conscious, especially in the world of performance. I really noticed I struggled a lot in that, you know, mid 200s, where you're definitely not skinny, but you're not like fat, you know. Uh, so you don't really know exactly what you are. You know, you could still, I guess, technically lose the weight if you wanted to, and you know, be the skinny singer that you think in your mind, at least, that you know everybody's going to want to see, and you know, you just want to people please to your heart's content. So yeah, I did struggle with that for quite a bit. However, as you know, the years have shown, gaining always has won in the end. I guess by the time I graduated from my undergrad, I was about 300. You know, still pretty chunky, especially at 6'4". I guess we should mention that as well. I'm quite tall too. So yeah, I started my master's degree probably because I took a year off in between. I think I was still around 300, and I actually lost quite a bit of weight at the beginning of my master's degree. Um, Not necessarily on purpose, mostly because I had just moved to a new town. I had moved to from Tennessee to Missouri, and the campus that I was at was really big, and of course, the two buildings that I had to go to were across the campus from each other. So either you know I had to walk there, or else I would have to you know be lucky and maybe catch the little campus bus that ran back and forth. But no, I did end up losing. I mean, not a significant amount of weight. I think I may have dipped below 300, but then I remember near the right before my last semester of my master's degree, I kind of had this moment where everything was just kind of like coming down around me, and it was just one of those moments of just like real actual clarity. You know, just to give a little bit of context. First of all, it was the election semester before the 2016 election. So like the world basically, or at least America, was falling apart. Uh, um, and there was a lot of trauma going on with the country, with my family. There was a lot of political divide. I was in a little argument with my sister, which was rare because we hardly ever fight. I was also like panicking because I was about to graduate from my master's degree, and I was like, wait, what do I want to do with my life? Like, I'm about to graduate. I don't really have a lot of like opera roles on my resume that I can like, target myself as. So I was basically like, what am I gonna do? I kept thinking in my mind, what's gonna happen? I don't know. I'm not ready. Am I gonna fail? Am I gonna have to like work at Taco Bell for the rest of my life? And then there was this moment, I remember it was over that Christmas break, and I don't know exactly what spurred it on, but it was just a moment where I just stopped all of the chaos in my life and I just said, you know what? Fuck it. I'm always going to be, either too skinny or too fat or too short or too tall. And I'm never going to be to the point where I think I'm ready enough. So, if I am, singing for all of these companies and auditioning, if they like me, great. If they don't, okay. I am going to do the best that I possibly can in that particular moment and focus on giving a more optimal performance rather than a perfect performance. Because guess what? No such thing as a perfect performance. That's my spiel on that. So yeah, after that, I got up to like 350. Then of course, after the master's degree, there was a lot of struggling, trying to find jobs, making ends meet. So I stayed around 350 for a while. I think I maybe even dropped down to like 340 or 330. Then I got my first like big boy job, and I started making money. And when I tell you that I started working in August, and like I said, I think I was 330, 340. By that Christmas, I was 380, and man, it was great. I do miss that. And then I guess we've just gone from there to this point where, I've just been steadily putting it on, and I like where I'm at and where we're going, and yeah, I guess that's all I'll say about that.
Love it. I mean, Tim, you've done some performance stuff in your time.
Well, not because I actively sought it out, but because it found me. Like, I've never auditioned for anything because I don't really have a desire to be on stage, and yet somehow I found myself on a couple of them. And a lot of it had to do with Jamie, my now late husband. He was always wanting to be the center of attention. So about the only way that I could do anything that was like, to be close to him was to get myself involved in it too. And that's how I wound up in the all boy dance troupe. That's how I got the walk on role in Wicked. That's how but it was never intentional. And I can't sing, like I can do karaoke, but that doesn't mean I can sing. Yeah, so it's like I've never actively sought out performing. It's just sort of happened around me.
My scope with performance is mostly limited to community theatre and like a little bit of drag. But that narrative on weight is very much a prevalent thing. I mean, when you do musical theatre, for God's sake, it's the warm-ups before you start to perform. And yes, you have to warm up every time you perform, I get that. But it's the jumping jacks and it's running laps and it's doing crunches and sit-ups and everything to try and like invigorate your body. And I'm sat here like, I thought we were doing this for fun. Exercise is not fun. I'm a talented person who just wants to show off. Like, that's fun to me. Letting the plebs know that I'm a very talented person, not breaking a sweat. That's not a part of my French vanilla fantasy.
It's a good thing that they can't hear your ego getting bigger.
No. But if you follow my Instagram, you will see it and my waistline expanding. So there you go. But I don't know. There's just a genuine thing, and I think anyone who's performed anywhere ever knows this. When you are on the larger side, and it doesn't matter how much larger, I think anything larger than straight size, people will notice that, and indirect comments will come your way in terms of, will you be able to deliver this performance? And it's just sort of like, framed as like a generic, like, do you have the talent? Do you have the range to do what needs to be done? But really what they're saying is, if you're trying to belt out that note, do you have enough fitness in your bloated body to like hold and sustain a note without passing out fatty? Can you pay attention to your script without thinking of donuts for too long? You know, it's that kind of really judgmental attitude and atmosphere, which I do think comes from a slight showgirls style desire to slip the pearls under your feet and send you cascading to the floor so they can take center stage. Just in my experience.
That's a very Showgirls reference. I don't know. Have you ever seen Showgirls, James?
Oh, I've never seen Showgirls, but I know the reference about the pearls.
You know the reference about the beads? Okay.
It's like before I'd seen Mummy Dearest, I knew about Data, bring me the axe, but I'd never seen it.
I'm glad that I could introduce you to that.
You'll have to introduce me to Showgirls. Michael, have you seen Showgirls?
Yes, I have. It's one of my favorites. Ugh, love it so much.
For the listeners who know what the fuck is going on, which character in Showgirls are you?
Which one am I?
Both of you. Which character in Showgirls are each of you?
I'll let Michael go first.
I would have to say, I can't think of the character's name, but Jennifer Holliday's character. Oh my god, am I thinking of Dreamgirls instead of
You're thinking of
Showgirls?
Dreamgirls.
Oh,
I'm thinking of Dreamgirls. Oh my god.
both about singing, but they're very, very, very different films. Very different.
Yeah. Very different movies.
Yes, and sorry to go
but
I don't think you'd be allowed to do "And I Am Telling You I'm Not Going." I don't think that's kosher anymore.
Yeah, you know, as much as I love that song and as much as I've always wanted to do it, I am not, because not my song to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Showgirls is about the trashy showgirls in a Vegas, performance at a casino, and it's like it's total trash. It's one of the worst movies ever made, but it's so bad it's good. And if I were any character, I'm probably Molly, the one who gets abused the most. Molly is the doormat that just puts up with everybody's bullshit, gets used and abused, and actually she gets sexually assaulted in the film. So that's yeah.
That's heavy. Well, in that case, Tim, assign the roles. Who is Michael and who am I?
That's kind of a tough one, because nobody is as irritating as Nomi. She's just the worst protagonist in any film. Like, she's worse than Bella Swan. So I wouldn't assign anyone to. I guess James, you're kind of like Gina Gershon's character, Crystal.
Okay, I'm Crystal.
And I don't know for Michael, honestly. Maybe the more talented girl that tries to she's the one that throws the beads out on the stage to trip one of the other girls.
Okay, so that is Michael. I see how it is. Well, listen, listeners, we've cast the show. If you have a recasting in mind, you can let us know at thiccradio@gmail.com. But curious to ask, as you've grown in public consciousness, so to say, Michael, both professionally and physically, do you find that you are treated differently by colleagues, crowds, promoters?
In my case, and I know this isn't the case for everyone, I have actually gotten a little bit more respect more than anything. And I can almost guarantee you that it's a confidence thing, because as I continue to go down my gaining journey, I did become more confident. That confidence really shows, and people tend to pick up on that and tend to respect it a little bit more. However, one of the things that, you're talking about the musical theater and everybody warming up and dancing and everything. I have not been asked to do a lot of physically demanding roles over the last couple of years, which has been nice, because even when I was a little skinnier, the whole dancing thing, I'm not a dancer by any means. I love dancing and I think it's really beautiful, and I love watching it on stage. And whenever I do all of my musical theater directing stuff, I'm always on the music side of it, either in the pit or playing or conducting or just giving like vocal notes. But when it comes to dancing, I'm like, it's great. Ask the choreographer because it's not. It's. I can tell you one thing. It's not me.
I love that. You're repping the truffle shuffle, the Pentecostal two-step. You're giving me a little bit of hand choreography. That's what I see in your future. You know.
Yeah, no, that's me.
Love that for you. I mean, do you find instances where allowances are made for other industry professionals who are slimmer compared to yourself? And I mean, I suppose when I talk about those allowances, I suppose things like uh, dressing room access, things like maybe more suitable or comfy chairs, food even.
So it really boils down to the fact of the matter that yes, it is easier being a skinny person, and I think it's more of the like it's more of it's easier just to be a skinnier person in general. I think because the world is not built for fat people, unfortunately. I'm thinking about public seating anywhere you go, really, whether it be transport, um, actual theater seating, anything. The world, and it has changed in the last couple of years. I will say it has gotten better than what it was. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. Um, but yeah, it certainly is easier for skinny folks. There's obviously many more roles in musicals and operas and career and actual character. There are a lot more opportunity for skinnier folks there. I have seen a lot of shifting. Like I forget which company it was. I want to say it was somewhere on the East Coast, maybe Maryland. I can't remember exactly, but it was a production of Beauty and the Beast. And the character that they had casted for Belle was a plus size, and I mean like an actual plus size, not like this plus size where they like actually have a stomach. She was a fat black woman, and boy could she sing, and boy could she act. She was just the embodiment of Belle, and I loved that. I unfortunately I couldn't see the entire production. I'm sure for copyright reasons, but just the little bit that I saw of her, she was absolutely great. And the Beast, on the other hand, the actor who was the Beast, was a man with I forget the exact way to say, he was missing a leg. So he was a disabled man. But again, like his characterization of the Beast and the costuming that they did with his prosthetics was just absolutely fantastic. So seeing those minority groups represented, that made me feel a lot better. But yeah, when it comes down to it, it is easier for skinny people. Things are beginning to change, I feel like, but yeah, you start talking about dressing rooms, right? Right now, I'm singing at Disneyland, and a quintet of singers, and they give us all this tiny, tiny, tiny dressing room for all five of us. Uh, there's some points where I'm just like, oh, we can like barely all fit in here and keep all of our stuff together. And me being the fattest I am, like taking up all of this room, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But it is what it is at the end of the day.
I'm kind of surprised that you say that like for there's more roles for skinny people in something like opera, because I would think that opera is all about the voice. Like it really doesn't matter how you look, it depends on if you can actually sing the damn song.
I am so glad that you brought that up because I always get people messaging me, and not even like from the community, just like really anybody, even my sister, who I love her to death. But she's always she saw her first opera that I was in a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, "The opera's not over till the fat lady sings, right?" Like I don't really know anything about opera, but you know that it's going to be close to the end when some fat lady comes up and she starts singing. And I'm like, so yes, there is, especially there's a stereotype that opera singers are fat, and you have to be fat to be an opera singer. And yeah, it is kind of true. You do see, I've seen a lot of a lot more fat people sing an opera than they do in any other genre, particularly musical theater. Because I mean, if you're bringing it down to like vocal works on stage, you pretty much the two front runners are opera and musical theater. The thing about fat people and opera is that I don't know exactly when it happened, but you really started to see a shift. When the public conscious was like, "Ooh, fat is bad, fat is lazy, fat is unhealthy. We don't want that." The political zeitgeist of the world. So you have these people who run the opera circuit in America. So the biggest opera house, or I guess most famous in America, at least, most people would say, is the Met in New York City. And you start looking at some of their singers from like 60s, 70s, and 80s, and you see the shift. You're like, yeah, you may have a couple of fat singers, but then they start trimming it down. They start leaning it down because they were trying to fight this image of, oh, only fat people sing opera. And so they started getting all of these, skinnier singers, which, yes, they're also talented. There's tons of talented skinny singers, tons of talented fat singers. But you really stopped seeing a lot of fat opera singers being cast in places like the Met, Houston Grand Opera, just the big major opera houses in the US, at least. As for Europe, that's a whole nother ballgame. But
I mean,
yeah.
And it's a really important discussion point to be had, because I do think sometimes, like within the community, there's that kind of narrative that people like to labor on, right? Like there are still some vestiges, some safe hideaways for fat people in the world. And it's usually like the 1800s and opera and Santa Claus, right? And like that's about it. But the truth is that it's not. Because at a certain point in human history, during the Renaissance and leading into the Reformation of the Church, this is back when puritanical ideology really started to come through. So the construct of obesity was starting to be looked at as, well, you are morally wrong. You are indulging in the sins of gluttony and sloth. How could you possibly be a good, pious Christian during the age of the Reformation of the Church? So you see people starting to trim down. The idea of people being pro-fat is really a falsehood. Similarly with opera, even if there is probably some science to the argument that having a larger body means you can bolster your voice more, all that said, an industry that relies on that narrative like opera, and in a world that says obesity is a bad thing, people are going to turn around and say, well, opera is bad then. If opera is only good if there are fat people and fat people are bad, then therefore opera is bad. So it makes sense that in order for opera to function, they then have to cast away with the fat people. To be like, no, look at us, we're keeping up, we're modern. Because this is also the struggle of every form of art that is not Hollywood cinema. It is constantly fighting to stay relevant and gather new people, new patrons, new punters, because everyone's having to fight for that spot. And even things like Santa Claus, like pretty much every new fucking Santa Claus that comes out is some hot old daddy where the plot line is, yeah, it's just his coat that's super bulky, it's built to insulate him, or, yeah, that's like based on a picture of me back in the 40s before I found Jenny Craig, and whatever bullshit line they want to throw. Santa is very rarely portrayed as being actually fat anymore, right? And I feel like this is something that's actually very important for us to address as a community. There isn't actually industries or places for us to think, oh, this is like a stronghold of obesity. Doesn't fucking exist. It is very much a false narrative. And we need to be willing to kind of unpack that fantasy that we tell ourselves, because when we live within that fantasy, we're not addressing the reality. And I feel like maybe even Michael, I don't know if you would speak to this, but I feel like maybe that's something that you discover through the process of your studies. Like you're someone who's wants to pursue gaming, wants to pursue opera, there's probably that thought in your mind of like, do you know what? Maybe this is the right move for me, because if I get fat and I do opera, no one's going to question it because it's a normal thing. And then you have that break of reality of going, oh, this like idea that always is propagated does not marry the lived reality that people actually experience in that industry. And I just feel like we need to really do some work to try and unpick that for people,
Mm-hmm.
I want to touch on something here that, Michael, I'm not sure if you will have some experience with, but whenever there's a performance, there's marketing materials, there's promos, right? And there's usually images of people plastered on the front to try and appeal to the locals or to appeal to whoever, like, oh, look, this is the visual. So-and-so will be headlining or partaking in this performance, right? So photographs in magazines and marketing campaigns. There's a narrative that we understand that these are often highly doctored and edited to make people look smaller, whiter, younger, and thinner. Is this something you've experienced in your career?
It's not something that I've personally experienced, but it's something that I've noticed a lot. I have a couple of friends who are very talented and have kind of, broken into, I guess, what you could call the famous level of singing in the opera world, many of whom are larger. There's one of my friends I'm thinking of, and I won't say his name just, for privacy reasons and everything, but he is probably one of the best singers I have heard and performed with. The first time I got to sing with him and he just opened his mouth and sang, I was like, oh my God, what a voice. He's got to be somewhere between 600 and 700 pounds. So he is a massive guy. And it was kind of just like, I was in awe the first time I saw him, because I'm like, wow, here is like this really big man of size and a leading role. We were doing Othello, the Italian version Othello, and he was the lead character. And it's the way that the music was written and the way that he interpreted it. It was like it was written for him, and he does it really, really all over the world. Because that's what he's known as doing, is that particular role, and he's really good at it. So, and people, get in contact with his agent, and he goes everywhere and does it. But in all of the like, not propaganda, but just like the posters and stuff, the advertisements, yes, they do have him, but it's always in like, oh, let's try to get him to look as thin as possible, or let's try to get his good side, because we don't want to make sure that he looks too fat. Yeah, and I've seen stuff like that in other fat singers who are, oh, let me get you from the good side, or let's try to make you look as skinny as possible. And I'm like, why does it matter? It's about the talent, it's about the voice, and that's on it. Honestly, from what I've seen with like audience members rarely tend to give a shit how big and fat somebody is on stage. They want to come see a show because they want to experience the magic or be transported and take a little break from reality, and if a person, whether it be a supporting role or a lead role, or just even in the chorus or the ensemble, if they're fat, who cares? It mostly boils down to producers and directors' attitudes, who, depending on what they want, if they want it to make a very, I call it like whitewashed version of reality, where everything is, just fighting perfect, everybody's skinny, everything is perfect. And you do see a lot of that. I feel like that ideology is being broken down, at least, but it still exists and it's still there. So, the battle is not over quite yet.
I don't know how much you can speak to it, but do you find that happening with Disney? Because you want to talk about a company that has to sanitize everything. I mean, they have to make everything so wholesome that it's above reproach. So, like, do you find like I again, I don't know if you can say or not, but like have you ever felt pressured to be a smaller person working for them?
And I've only been at Disney for not a long time, so I can only speak to my experience of it, which probably is not as grand as somebody who's been a part of Disney for, years and years and years. Um, I haven't yet. Disney tends to be more, they're very fat friendly, actually, especially in the Disneyland park. Their seats are more suited towards fat people. They
Well, I
have
was going to say
more,
because 95% of Americans are overweight, so like they would be cutting down a
mhm.
huge market if they didn't.
Exactly. They have mobility cards. When I'm going backstage, there's just like rows and rows of extra mobility carts. So yeah, Disney, they're kind of getting it right.
I do want to flag just quickly here two podcasts that I think people should be aware of, especially just in terms of conversations we've been having. The first one, I talk about it constantly. It's Maintenance Phase, co-hosted by Michael Hobbs and Aubrey Gordon, also known as Your Fat Friend. Both of them journalists, researcher, author type people. They are intelligent, they do research, they deconstruct diets, weight loss fads, health and wellness celebrities, and they basically just give it to you carte blanche, and it's fabulous. Very much worth a listen to, just in terms of the content that they go through. The second one I want to reference is a podcast called More Than Tracy Turnblad, which is hosted by Abby Rose Morris. She is a musical theater alum from New York. She hosts and she interviews a number of people throughout the performance space, all of whom are plus size, people of color, people on the queer spectrum, and they really do speak to the sort of in the moment what's happening, musical theater, opera, cinema, what people are experiencing, what they've experienced with directors and with partnerships. So again, anyone listening to this who might be interested in hearing a little bit more about that particular world, that is very much a podcast I would recommend.
So we have a listener question. It says, can you give us an example of when you were able to put someone in their place when they were being rude about your weight during a show or at an event?
I personally, nobody has come up to me and been like, why are you up on the stage? You're so fat. Why aren't you like, why are you on stage? I've never had an experience like that. And I know that most cases when people get verbally assaulted because of their weight, usually it's not that like straightforward. It's usually comments, made to the side or, being passive aggressive. Personally, I haven't experienced that. It's all been I feel like the worst has been honestly me against me. All of that why are you up on stage, has been literally that voice in the back of my mind. It's like, oh, nobody's gonna take you seriously. Like when you go up on stage and they see that you're a fat guy, nobody's gonna be like, oh, let's listen to him. He's it's always been that voice inside my head holding me back. So like when I have that moment of just like cutting that voice off, boom. When it comes down to the end of the day, yeah, there's going to be people who discriminate because of your size, but it doesn't really matter. If they're going to be uppity about that, fuck them. Seriously, fuck them. You don't want to be a part of their company, no matter how grand you think it is, or no matter how much people say, oh, you need to, sing for this person. They're, the forerunners of 21st century opera. If they're going to treat you like that, you don't want to be there. Because if they're treating fat people like that, they're probably treating other minorities. I'm thinking people of color, people with disabilities, any other people that fit in those categories are getting the same type of treatment. And guess what? That's going to come back and bite them in the ass. So maybe they're going to be, they're the forerunners of whatever genre in this moment. Karma's going to come and have her way with them. I've seen it happen more than once.
I mean, I love that. And I think that's a very important point. Conversations on how to sort of unpack systemic fat phobia are big. How do we do that? It's a lot. We'll get there in time, step at a time. But, I think, Michael, you're absolutely right. That the first step for each and every one of us as individuals, whether we are in the arts or in any role, in any social situation, anywhere, at any time at all, if we perceive any sense of people are, putting themselves against us due to weight, that should be our cue to make an exit. Not because we don't deserve to occupy space, but because we deserve to occupy space that is open to us and accepts us, and we shouldn't have to torture ourselves to be a part of groups that are like that. And you're absolutely right. Karma will come for people. The talent will go to where the talent needs to go. And I mean, all communities and gaining is the same as opera, is the same as anything. If you garner a reputation for being discriminatory, for being a negative Nancy, for being abusive, for being someone who was unkind and just not a fun person, people group to work with, people are going to start avoiding you. People talk, and you only have as much power as people allot you. And if you waste that, and just because you wanted to exclude fat people, it's a bit of a sad way to lose your standing, But I would say the same thing of really standing yourself against any minority group. J.K. Rowling with trans people, just don't do it. Just don't do it. I mean, just even for popularity reasons. The whole fan base turned against you and said, "Girl, don't do it." And you were like, "Do you know what I'll do? I'm going to fuck them all off." And I'm going to double down on this.
Is that where she was like, I the royalty checks that I get make me sleep just fine? Because I saw something like someone had tweeted at her, like, how can you sleep at night knowing that because of who you are, you've lost this entire fan base and everything? And her response was, the royalty checks I get, I sleep just fine. I'm like, oh, bitch. Like, that is just an irredeemable, that is the most cunty response I've seen in a long time from a celebrity.
And you know what? It's very heartbreaking because I think, Tim, you're 1,000 years older than us. It's fine. Michael and I, we're a part of that generation where, when I was first reading the books, I was 8, 9, 10, and on my 11th birthday, my parents wrote me a fake Hogwarts acceptance letter, and I cried because
that is so sweet.
Well, because I think people in my generation, especially, we were growing up with it. So I think, especially to be that age bracket, you just felt such a connection and such this electrifying thing. It felt like I could make friends at the drop of a hat, no matter where I was, because you talk Harry Potter, everyone's into Harry Potter, and it was just this real cultural thing. I think during the late 90s and early 2000s that just kept going, and to have it stonewalled in such a way by the creator is painful. Interesting conversations on art versus the artists, which I think we'll probably come back to in subsequent episodes. But Michael, to wrap things up for the podcast, for plus size folk looking to develop their own careers and careers that may lead them towards being in the public eye, what advice would you give them when it comes to maintaining that confidence and self-assurance in the face of the media?
It's going to sound very cliche, and it is, but it still rings true, is just be unapologetically you. There's only one you in the world, and most casting agents, directors are looking for people who are new and fresh. We've already had, Whitney Houston's voice. We've already had just so many talented people. We don't want people, trying to imitate somebody like that. You need to be unapologetically you. And another thing that kind of rang true with me was just realizing that, yes, I am a singer and I am fat. And again, if they don't want me, then I'll just go sing somewhere else. I would rather be in a space where people appreciate me and my personality and my talents, as opposed to, me trying to fit into a cookie cutter form of, trying to manufacture myself into something that I'm not and never will be,
I think that's fantastic advice. Authenticity shines through every time, I think, and it's asking yourself, who am I at all times? deliver that and understand what your unique selling point is. I think when you grow up, you think to yourself, oh, it's because I'm the kid in the class who studies karate. I'm the kid who plays the harp because I'm trying to be fancy. But as you become an adult, you realize that your authenticity is what brings you to the table every time. It attracts the right people, and that's really the biggest part of any career that you'll have, is the networking. It is promoting yourself through, yes, your talent and capabilities, but also, what do you like to work with? Are we going to vibe in the off times? And what about when we come across stress and trouble? Because for anyone who's never done performance, you don't know this, but for anyone who's done any form of performance, Hell Week is called Hell Week for a fucking reason, right? I need to know that we're not going to kill each other before we get to opening night. So that authenticity and that genuineness, that humility as well, to learn from other people, but also not to say, oh, I'm going to change everything about myself to adhere to this advice, but to take that advice and apply it to me, to build me up in this particular way, to continue to center myself, bring myself forward with my talent in the midst of all of this. Definitely all of that. But Michael, that brings us to the end of our episode this week. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been an absolute delight, doll. Now, where can listeners find you online?
They can find me on Instagram as fatrick_the_gainer, or on Grommr as just Fatrick. Yeah, for some reason, Fatrick was already taken on Instagram, so I had to do that fun little underscore thing.
Bastards. The cheek. But listeners, that's where you can find Michael, and I'm sure if you would like to have samples of their music, listen to the capability, message them and see how far you get, see what he says. But that's it for another episode here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you like this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BeefyFrat at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and BeefyFrat at ThiccyMouse. You can also look us up on TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at www.podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note, you can reach us at anchor.fm/Thicc Radio/message. And if you have any questions or ideas for episodes, you can reach us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stan and Thicky Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by Stanham.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Body by Chris.